Man does something that shocks everyone upon discovering his ex-wife's pregnancy, just 2 months after their divorce. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Isabel and Daniel had been divorced for 2 months with no contact between them. Learning about the pregnancy felt overwhelming. How could she break the news to her ex-husband? Isabel wasn't prepared for his reaction, nor for what he might do next. It felt as if the world had spun faster, throwing her off balance. She leaned back against the sofa in her living room, her breath shaky as she stared at the positive pregnancy test in her hand. The news hit her like a rogue wave, crashing through her thoughts and leaving her reeling. How could she have missed the signs? She tried to focus on her memories of the past few months, playing them back in her mind to pinpoint when things began to change. 2 months after her separation from Daniel, she now found herself tied to him in a way she hadn't anticipated. The thought of reaching out to him for the first time since their split made her stomach churn. What would he say? Would this news alter the paths they'd begun to walk separately? Isabel and Daniel had shared a life together for 8 years, their story beginning in a quaint little bookstore where they both sought refuge from the bustling city. What started as casual conversations over their shared love of literature slowly turned into something deeper, something they both thought would last forever. But as with many relationships, the passing years brought unspoken tensions. Careers grew, dreams evolved, and the passion that once burned brightly between them flickered, replaced by a dull routine. Intimate conversations turned into brief exchanges of mundane updates. Their connection, once so strong, seemed like a distant memory, fading with each passing day. There were no screaming matches, no accusations. Their love simply withered, much like the forgotten novels gathering dust on their shelves. The decision to part ways was mutual, a quiet and sorrowful agreement that the life they built no longer fit who they had become. The love they had shared was still there, but it had transformed into something unrecognizable, a distant echo of what it once was. In the weeks after the divorce, Isabel found herself grappling with the discovery of her pregnancy. She often practiced how she would break the news to Daniel, rehearsing in front of the mirror. But when the moment came to pick up the phone, fear gripped her tightly. What if Daniel had already moved on? What if he was building a new life without her? She didn't want to force him back into her world if he was already gone. It wasn't until a routine visit to her gynecologist that Isabel's world darkened even further. A follow-up scan revealed something concerning, a small lump. Further testing confirmed her worst fears. She had ovarian cancer. Suddenly, Isabel's reality was split into 2 impossible choices: pursue treatment for herself and risk losing the life growing inside her, or delay treatment in hopes of carrying her pregnancy to term. The choices tore at her heart. Despite the fear, Isabel knew one thing with certainty. She would do whatever it took to protect the baby she was carrying, even if it meant risking everything. The decision weighed heavily on her, but the love for her unborn child strengthened her resolve. But the question of how to tell Daniel now felt even more daunting. Fate, however, had its own plans. On a cloudy afternoon, Isabel stepped out of her doctor's office and ran straight into Daniel. His familiar face startled her as though he were a ghost from another life. Daniel. Her voice was barely a whisper, thick with emotion. Isabel, it's been a while. His voice trailed off as his eyes fell on her slightly swollen belly. Confusion and shock flooded his face. Isabel, are you pregnant? He asked, his voice barely concealing the tremor. Is that mine? The words lodged in Isabel's throat as she fell into his arms, too overwhelmed to speak. After a few moments of silence, Isabel gathered enough strength to tell him everything: the pregnancy, the cancer, and the impossible choice that lay ahead of her. I've decided to keep the baby, no matter what happens, she said quietly, tears threatening to spill. I'll fight for this child. You don't have to be involved if you don't want to, but I needed you to know. Daniel stood still for a moment before his expression softened. His eyes filled with determination and a gentleness that once defined their bond. You're not doing this alone, Isabel, he said firmly, wrapping his arms around her. This is our child. No matter what happens between us, I will be there for both of you. Always. Isabel hadn't expected his words. She had braced herself for rejection, for anger. But instead, she found herself comforted by a man she thought had drifted too far from her life. From that moment on, Daniel returned to Isabel's life in ways she hadn't foreseen. He was by her side at every appointment, supporting her through each step of her difficult pregnancy. Despite the grim prognosis, the bond between them began to heal in the most unlikely of ways. As Isabel's illness progressed, the weight of her decision bore down on both of them. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear, but Daniel's steadfast presence was a constant source of comfort. Every day felt like a battle, but amidst the turmoil, there was still hope. As the weeks turned into months, Isabel found herself rediscovering the connection she thought had been lost forever. Eventually, the time came for their son to be born. Isabel underwent a planned cesarean section, and their child entered the world healthy and strong, a ray of hope amidst the uncertainty. But there was little time to celebrate. Shortly after the birth, Isabel underwent surgery and began chemotherapy, fighting the cancer that threatened to take her from her child. In the months that followed, Daniel took on the role of both father and caretaker, dedicating himself entirely to Isabel and their newborn. The strain of treatment left Isabel weak, but Daniel's unwavering support helped her through the darkest of times. Day by day, they found themselves growing closer once more, the cracks in their relationship slowly mending. 2 years passed, and a small gathering was held to celebrate their son's second birthday. Friends and family came together, but there was one more surprise in store. As the group sang happy birthday, Daniel stood up, taking Isabel's hand in his. "Isabel, we've been through more than most people could ever imagine. I said we'd celebrate life together, and here we are. I'd like to ask you, will you marry me again, so we can celebrate life, every day side by side?" Through tears and laughter, Isabel nodded. They had found their way back to each other, not in spite of the trials they faced, but because of them. Together, they had built a new kind of love, stronger than before. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.